Today I'm going to watch the sequel to Death Bell. Now I did watch the previous edition, the original, but um, there was an error in the processing of the recording for this kind of thing, and so I couldn't really upload it. Um, um, I cannot obviously just redo everything. So I'm just going to go straight to the sequel and I'll compare if need be at any rate. As usual, any sequel they sort of requires, I suppose, or really can use. And well, as usual, like the previous one, they begin with a very light note, very light. And this one it's slightly even lighter. I mean, there's a very jovial soundtrack in the background, and they similarly as with the other one, they have a ranking thing, which is obviously crucial in these films. Considering, I'm assuming there will be another sort of story to the. I mean, since the culprit was found in the original, so I'm assuming there's going to be someone else. We'll see. And so for just before the title screen, they went with something like the hole. The hole had a scene in a swimming pool as well, and I'm not sure which came first, but yeah. Anyway, and yeah, what do you know? They literally do rankings again. Um, not very original, right? I mean, usually with sequels, at least they do something different. I mean, okay, this is cool, so I guess I don't know what else it could do different, but the same screen and everything. I'm almost expecting that guy to freak out again, just a repeat of everything. I think the characters are new, the actors are, I think. Not sure though, because it's been a few days, so I might be misremembering, but they likely are new. And so far, it's slightly different from the other story, but not vastly. Hmm. The piano scene was interesting, to say the least. This even begins with some teacher telling his class that didn't quite use the word elite like they did in the first one, but they could have changed that a bit. And what's the point of just uh, practically remaking it? I mean, at this point, I mean, if it's a remake, then well, viewers can only suspect one thing. But hey, at least it has that party music while they're doing their class. Not sure how it's relevant, but it's party, while looking at a whiteboard or whatever. And what do you know? In the bathroom toilet, there's a seemingly a Korean um, carry amalgamation, apparently. So it derived tropes from two Western horror movies so far. Um, yeah. Hmm. Well, I nearly have an hour in, and random stuff is happening. I mean, there were a couple of random things happening, a couple, literally a couple, in the previous one, but in this one, it seems like everything that's happening is random so far. In the other one, at first I thought there wouldn't be anything coherent about what's happening, and then there was, and it was, sort of like in Saw, but And this one doesn't seem like. Uh, okay, at this point, I suppose it might just follow the other one and suddenly we find out, but I don't know. It seems to be more random, and more random stuff has already happened, really. So I don't get either why everyone's sleeping at school. What's the point of that on benches as well? But yeah, of course, as predicted, same thing will happen, and it's and the science sequels should, I suppose, have the same format. Otherwise, I mean, if there wasn't, I suppose it would be worse if it was all negative throughout. But I don't know. It's about vengeance as well, apparently. It's not like the first one. Of course, at this point, I mean, the first one was clever enough to try to, make people think that it was a ghost. Um, but this one, I suppose, people were the suspect, I suppose, yeah. Yeah, the weird thing is that it also replicates the original up to the very minute details. So like they even commented about someone's attractiveness. I mean, sequels, I suppose, are fine to have the same sort of backbone structure of a narrative, but it's a bit weird to have such minor details, and it makes it look more like a remake rather than simply a sequel, I suppose. Well, in terms of the deaths themselves, I suppose isn't a direct remake or anything, but they're equally as gruesome. I mean, this series seems to have some of the most gruesome deaths one could imagine. Like, being hit by a motorbike is already bad, but having some sort of spikes coming out of it, some in rotation as well. Uh, it wasn't it what ancient Rome used to send to wars, I think. Not motorbikes, just chariots with such things. I think I'm not sure. So. At one point, there's a skull with red in the background. As if the sky is red. While that is a sort of a nice artistic touch, I suppose, that chimes in with a bloody theme. It, well, I don't know. It's inexplicable, isn't it? Like even the Three Mothers trilogy, at least used internal lighting to have red surfaces and rooms and such. The colors as well, which makes more sense, if it's internal lighting, it's internal lighting. A red sky. The only time sky is usually red, can be red, is in between dusk usually. That's when it's still daylight, not at night. It would be very spooky though if a red sky at night was possible. But yeah, it is mostly random, really. Much more random, at least. I mean, that was a similar speaker sort of introduction. And the so-called questions were all just uh, staple, who's doing this, just just that. So, some even as, I suppose, interesting as it's not the other one was interesting because in a way the the watchers themselves weren't able to do it as much, especially ones that were watching with subtitles. When anagrams were asked about the chat, and even unless people know can understand the Korean language, then it's pretty helpless. But with this one, it's not even there at all. It's just whatever random stuff that happens that centers around some event in the past, but it's not really incredibly relevant either, mostly. So in this case, it reminds me of Nightmare, thing that was also a South Korean film. So, but mm, well, so far at least makes even less sense. But we'll see how it ends. And yeah, what do you know? As soon as I mention anagrams, it happens. And instead of water in the previous movie with the washing machine, it was fire this time. So I don't know. Sort of kind of like three mothers, I guess, where they use different elements as well. Except it makes even less sense. I mean, the three mothers at least try to use some sort of mythology, even though it was gory as well. So both of these are very gory series. But this does make little sense. I mean, if the original wasn't bad at all. The original at least had a twist and such. So in that sense, it made more sense than most other things at main level. I thought it was going to be another random ghost story. With this one, well, so far it does seem like a ghost story. Obviously, you can always twist it again, but at this point, it won't be much of a twist, considering expectations of this. I don't know why I keep watching gory movies. Really, I mean, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for pure horror, which isn't gore really. Gore is just disgusting in my opinion. As I think I mentioned previously in other movies, but in other commentaries. But somehow, horror in people's mind, in movie makers' mind, is linked inextricably with gore, which is absurd. I mean, maybe just a bit. I mean, most movies have a bit of, you know, but the level of this is incredible. I mean, sure, similar to Saw and such, but I'm not saying, Western horror movies are any better. Generally, this is the thing that people perceive. And yeah, it's not bad, is it? I mean, it's didn't have that a I mean, it tried to do something similar, to, in comparison to the original. At least it wasn't identical, but it didn't have the heft so that the original had. I think the original seemed to have more of a reason for everything happening. This, on the other hand, well, yeah, there was a reason, but I'm not sure. There was something that seemed disconnected. Whereas with the other one, at the end, it made sense more than this one did. Mm, but it wasn't really. Just one thing. So I mean, if they could have just broke through and exited, why didn't they do that at the beginning? I didn't get that. They just at the beginning just decided to just back off, do something else. It's only at the end, and everything else. Just that was a bit of an omission, I suppose. I would say. But yeah, I should probably not watch as many of these because I mean, um, especially Korean horror seems to have a single storyline. It's also very similar to Japanese horror. Uh, I'm not sure if you could just apply this apply it to all horror. But these tend to have, a storyline about vengeance generally. Whether it's by a ghost or someone real, is left to. I think they are mostly about ghosts, but sometimes I guess they deviate a bit, which really was the interesting twist in the original Death Bell. I'm assuming anyone listening to this will have watched the original Death Bell, so I don't suppose this would be a spoiler per se. But yeah, I like that, but there wasn't really anything more here, any other twists or anything. So in that sense, they didn't really do much more except do something similar to the original that Bell did, and not much more. I mean, it did very much, from the beginning. It seemed to be very, very similar. Not quite a remake, obviously. All the deaths were not all of them were original, but most were, I guess. So but I don't especially want to see original deaths or anything. But um, there was also another person who went insane, similar to the original death, except she seemed to go insane with uh, some sort of drugs this time. And I suppose that was sort of interesting what they did there, because in this um, in this context in the movie, if one sees ants go all over, some sort of insect go all over someone, and they assume that it's part of the thing that they're doing. It's how they released loads of insects or whatever. But no, what I think happened there is that the medication produced such a hallucination. I assume it was. In which case, I'm assuming it was some sort of stimulant because that's what they do. But what they can do at least in huge amounts of it. But yeah, otherwise it's as usual try to be as gruesome as possible. And the story though wasn't as convincing as the original. Yeah, and the original, at least, I mean, it wasn't a teacher. I mean, that would be a complete replica then. So I suppose I really thought it was the teacher who locked the school in the first place. Because why else would he lock the school? But apparently not. I think he just disappeared. I think. I don't know. Sometimes I can't quite recognize people, especially at different light levels. So I don't think he was the teacher I thought that ended up in that dark room. I think that was another teacher. But yeah, I suppose on that. They also never resolved the issue with the female teacher. I mean, they ended up battering her because they thought she was at fault when she wasn't, when she was coerced to do a speech. It's very bizarre, and then they just forgot about her, and then they decided to, yeah. So I don't know. It was just another one of these, I suppose. Uh, yeah, I should probably just not watch so many of these because they do have almost an identical storyline. I mean, within the same series, I guess one kind of expects for the storylines to be similar, kind of like the One Miss Call series. It's quite similar. They're all quite similar. But this was similar in the sense that it didn't have the exact same structure. And there weren't really any questions either, so I mean that's a difference, I guess, but not just necessarily a positive difference. There just weren't questions, and wasn't so much questions as it seemed looser and not as coherent as the first one, really. Yeah, I certainly prefer the first one over this. Not that it's still gory, it's still unnecessarily so, I think, but it had at least an interesting story at the very end, at least. Yeah, they did.